So it is more like a psychic exercise. And usually when there are practical sessions, I do like people to, interact with me. So some talks, it's okay to talk about it. Some talks you would like, but I don't know how to do that on Zoom. So we'll just go ahead and see how it goes. Now, Mr. Tavaria, that is Tavaria Sahib, he had this whole set of exercises, right from the refining exercises, the exercises in phases, but he laid a great emphasis on something which we call pause, that he would translate the initial sutra, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So he would translate the word Nirodha as pause, and in its practical aspect to pause. Now, the whole effort is to be free of our mechanical, automatic reaction to pause in to react in every situation of life. So this is an inbuilt mechanism, and it has come from the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom in the sense that they react to external stimuli. They are programmed to react to external stimuli. And as long as man psychologically only reacts to external stimuli, that is to the events of life, that every moment he is reacting to some event in life, then we have not really risen above the animal kingdom. It's still what is programmed in the animals as responding to external stimuli. So today we are going to talk about the pause as a practical exercise. Now, an impression comes in from the five senses, and that impression, it evokes a decoding, and that decoding is done with memory, and a thought is created inside. Now, if the creation of that thought is automatic, then where do we start bringing consciousness in this whole procedure? So one is that the impression comes from inside, and before my chitta, the inner brain, before that receives and decodes the impression, I'm conscious of the impression, and I decide in which way I'm going to allow this impression to be decoded. In the sense that, supposing someone is very angry at me, and I get this impression that he has used some words with me, and they come in. Now, if I'm standing consciously over there, then I have the choice of deciding how to interpret those words. Now, if those words were to come in automatically, then they follow something within me which is called an association. And that association leads to a certain reaction. So that reaction would be, what right do you have to speak with me in this way? Or it could be that who do you think you are that you're going to insult me, right? Now that reaction has come automatic. But now supposing I'm standing there in between, and I say that these words have come in, but I change the meaning of the words. I say if somebody is hurt inside, then only the ego can be hurt inside. And these words, if they are stimulating the ego into some kind of action, then they give me a chance to observe the workings of the ego. So the same words mechanically would stimulate a certain reaction. And the same words, if I'm there before I decode them, if I'm standing there consciously, then they may, what do you call, have a totally different meaning. And they may take me one step higher on my search for consciousness. So the thing is that at a certain time when the reaction happens, we want to pause the reaction, stop it from going further. Now we can do this in another way, that supposing I could say that the impulse which is coming from outside, the impression which is coming from outside, it comes at a very fast speed. Definitely my consciousness at this stage does not have that capacity to stand in between at that speed. The decoding is also done very fast, and the reaction starts a chain of thought in my mind. Who is this person to speak with me in this way? What right does he have? Doesn't he know who I am, etc., etc. And that chain of thought, which is a reaction, can I pause it over there? Can I pause that chain of thought and not allow it to go further? So I'm just trying to, I'll recapitulate on this, that one, the impression comes inside, and before anything happens to the impression, my consciousness has reached a state where I can stand in between. And the second, the impression comes inside, and we automatically decode the impression. We give it a meaning that it is called an insult or whatever. And our chain of thought starts moving in that direction, and we pause that chain of thought. I think at our present state where we are, this is more easy than the first one. But definitely we want to reach to a state where we are able to stand in between the impression and the decoding of the impression. Now, so this requires something to be done mentally, something to be done in the mind. And it is like standing statue in the mind, right? So when we were little children, in school, we would play statue, and somebody would say statue, and that means statue of the body. The body is frozen. We are not allowed to move the body. And in the game, you had to hold that posture for 1 minute. And the thing was that the other people, somebody will come and do like this, or somebody will, do something like that in front of you, so that you break the statue and you've lost the game, right? Now, this is a physical statue. All of us have played this game when we were in school. But similarly, something happens in the mind. And we have to become statue in the mind. And how do we pause in the mind? How do we stop in the mind? The idea is to hold on to the last thought and not go further than the last thought. So you have said some words to me. Those words have come in through the 5 senses. I have decoded them, that this person has insulted me, etc., etc. And I are now an automatic chain of thought starts, that who does he think he is? What does he mean by insulting me in this way? And at a point in that chain of thought, I become aware, I become conscious. And at that point, I hold on to the last thought. So supposing the last thought is, who does he think he is? What does he think of himself? Supposing this is the last thought, then I can even repeat this inside, verbally. I can say, who does he think he is? But I don't want to go further than this. Otherwise, my thoughts will automatically go on a certain chain. Yesterday he insulted this person, tomorrow he'll do this, etc. I don't want the thoughts to go further. So I hold on to that last thought and I statue in the mind. I remain immobile in the mind. And this is the beginning of the pause. And so many thoughts will come and try to get you out of this statue. Like when we were children in the, what do you call, the physical statue, people would make faces at us or, make some sounds or do something to make us laugh immediately so the statue is broken. Similarly, so many thoughts will come that he is like this, he is this, but we'll say, no, who is he to say these words to me? The last thought, we will hold on to that last thought and not go further. We will try to let the other thoughts pass by. And this is the beginning of Nirodh. This is the beginning of pause. Now, it takes a lot of work. In the mind, the law of the jungle runs. If there is a lion and the lion is looking at a herd of deer, the deer sense the lion and they are all standing immobile. Now man has a different kind of vision from the animals. For the animals to see, there must be movement. As long as no deer is moving, the lion can't do anything. It doesn't know what is happening. The minute one deer moves, the lion runs and tries to pounce upon that deer. So movement in the jungle at the wrong time leads to death. Similarly, in the mind, a little bit of movement and we'll be hypnotized by another thought, vritti sarupyam itaratra, and we'll again go into a chain of thinking. And it is at this point the other thoughts will come. They will try to break our statue. They will try to break that immobility in the mind and again try to take us into a state of identification. So this is how the pause is done, the beginning of the pause. And don't think that these thoughts are just thoughts. They are all the same friends which were, poking us in the face when we were in statue, when we were children. They are the same friends, right? And they are talking to us, these thoughts. They will, what a foolish person you are, not reacting to him. You have to put him into his place. You have to do this. They will talk to us and we hold on to the last thought where we became aware and don't allow us to go further. Don't allow ourselves to go further. So now, apart from thoughts, many other things will happen. Memory may come in and a sudden impulse may come, oh, at this time I had to phone someone, and immediately the statue will go away. Right? Now, this is the moment where you want to hold the statue because there is an urgency in that phone call, which we have to make. And in that, if we hold the statue, then our new habit of pausing, this new habit of pause, which we are creating, trying to create, will become more powerful because it has now run through a higher obstacle. So a sudden thought from memory will come that I have to phone this person, right? Or somebody's car horn may come through the window and we hear the horn and we forget that the person who was going to come to clean the car is going to come now and I'm supposed to tell him, again, hold on. So it is not just the thoughts from around us which will try to break the thing, but so many thoughts which will be created in the environment around by impulses from the environment around. as long as we are motionless in the mind, then no thought can lead us into a state of identification. Now, before going further, okay. What I want to say is, where do we get the energy to hold attention? That is why I wanted this to be a little interactive, but I'm asking you a question. Where do we get the energy to hold attention?
From mind? From our mind?
From?
Mind.
You know, Gurdjieff has a beautiful cosmology, and I just touch upon it a little. So Gurdjieff says that there is a ray of creation, and that ray of creation, he has his own cosmology. We don't want to go into that. But it comes to a stage where God cannot take it further. And God wants to bring life into those parts of the universe which do not have life. So there is this general idea of evolving. So according to science, the moon is a dead planet. According to Gurdjieff, the moon is gaining energy from somewhere, and it is going to use that energy for evolving so that one day it can have life like the earth has life. Now, we don't want to go into the scientific basis for this. What we want to do is just try to understand what he's saying. So, the divine creator or the divine engineer, he then brought about plant life on the planet. Plant life took energy from the sun. And when the plant died, it released that energy which went into the moon, and the moon used that energy for its growth. Now, after a certain time, the divine engineer said that the moon is not getting the right amount of energy needed to bring about that evolution on the moon. So he created animal life on the earth, and animal life, when the animal dies, it releases a certain energy which goes to the moon. After maybe millions of years or whatever, he realized that still the moon is not getting the right kind of energy. So they decided to create man. Now, initially, when he created man, he found that the moon is still not getting the right kind of energy. So then he says, then man, the body of man which we have created, if we put an Atma, a divine fragment in this man, maybe the moon will get the energy. And they found that after putting the divine fragment in man, putting the Atma in man, The moon was getting enough of energy for its evolution. But because they put this divine fragment in man, another possibility came in man, that either he could become mechanically food for the moon, feed the moon, or he could realize that inner divinity and grow himself. Of course, this was individual. It was not the general evolution. Now, what is that special energy which man provides to the moon? And where does this energy come from? Somebody said the sun. But this is the energy which allows us to walk on the spiritual path. Without this energy, we cannot walk. To walk inwards, we have to hold attention inwards. This holding of attention, Patanjali calls as dharana, right? So when we hold the attention inwards, we need a certain amount of energy to hold that attention. Where do we get that energy from? Now, to run a business, I need a small amount of capital to start the business. Supposing I have no capital, then I cannot start the business, however good the business is. I mean, to earn more money, I must first have a little money to earn more money. But if I don't even have that little money, I cannot earn money. Similarly is the state of consciousness. To earn more consciousness, I must first have a little bit of consciousness. And where does that conscious energy come from? Now, every night when we go to sleep, and in deep sleep, the soul, the Jeev, goes back into the spirit, the Atma. In deep sleep, both of them merge. When we come out of the sleep, the soul comes out of the Atma. We wake up in the morning, we are fresh, we are rested, and we have earned, I don't say earned it, but we've been gifted a little bit of pocket money, right, to start our business. And that is why the whole Indian tradition was that when you wake up at early in the morning with this very fine energy which the soul has got from the spirit, before we waste it in anything, in Brahma Muhurat, you better do something with that energy. Whatever you do, your prayers or whatever meditation or whatever, invest that energy, that money in the right investment. Otherwise, the minute we get the newspaper in the hand, that energy has gone and we've invested it in the wrong place and it goes to the moon. I don't know if I've been able to come across it. Now it is this energy. All other energies on the earth come from the sun. The food I eat comes from the sun. But this energy which man wakes up with every morning does not come from the sun. It comes from the inner divine. It is that divine fragment gifting this energy. It is our pocket money of the day. And when we use this energy properly, we can divide our attention and hold our attention on our inner states, on our inner reactions, what you call as a tapaswadhyaya ishwar pranita. We can move inwards. Without this energy, we cannot move inwards. Don't think for a moment that it is the energy which we get from the food that we eat that we use for moving inwards. Now, this very, very fine energy, which is of the highest quality, let us call it as divine energy. Nature wants that energy. She wants it to give to the moon, right? And we have woken up with this energy and we lose this energy in reactions. We lose this energy in negative states. I may wake up and my wife has left a note, make your own tea. I am going for my tea party meeting in the morning. And the minute I get angry or I get irritated or I get upset, that pocket money which I've woken up with, it's all gone to the moon. And most of us are bankrupt by 12 o'clock in the afternoon, right? We've lost all our pocket money by 12 o'clock in the afternoon. So it goes away in negative states. So we must learn to pause these reactions. We must learn to, pause our negative states so we save that energy. Of course, we'll go one day into the very, the deeper aspects of this energy, because it is also connected with the movement of the sun of Uttarayan and Dakshinayan. And we'll take one talk on that one day. Now, this energy can be consciously, gathered, what Gurdjieff calls as digesting impression food. So when an impression comes in, somebody insults me, instead of reacting to that, I pause and then I digest that impression. Then I am now personally extracting that energy which I've got automatically at night. And it is this energy which allows us to follow the spiritual path. But to be able to digest that energy, I must be conscious. And that is why, to start my business of becoming more conscious, first I need a little capital. And that capital comes from the divine fragment. Every night when I go to sleep, in the morning, he gives it to me. And if I don't waste it, then I can gather that energy and use it to be conscious at the moment of reception of an impression. And at that moment, if I'm conscious, I don't react, then I gain energy instead of losing energy. See, sadhana or, the spiritual journey is not something we do in the morning. It is every moment of our life. So in this moment, something is coming in from the five senses. If I can pause and I digest it, then I've taken one more step on the spiritual path. And if I cannot pause and I react and throw it out, then I fall down a little. Every moment I have these two choices in my life. Spirituality does not mean, doing anything very special. It is moment to moment being conscious in that moment. And for that, we learn to pause our reactions. Now, we're going to go into chapter 3 of the Yoga Sutra. And we're going to see how Patanjali has described this pause, how the Rishi has described this pause. And we are going to take 4 sutras today, chapter 3, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we'll start with Sutra 9. Keta will just come with the sutra. Vyuthana nirodha sanskaryo abhibhava pradurbhava nirodha kshana chitta anvaya nirodha parinama. Here, Patanjali is saying, he's talking about 2 sanskars, 2 habits. The habit of Vyuthan and the habit of Nirodha. We are not going to go deep in the words today. When this comes in our Yoga Sutra, we'll go deep into each of these words. But we'll take the immediate translation of the word Vyuthan as reaction. So Patanjali is saying that for thousands of years, we have this habit of reacting, which he calls as Vyuthan. Now we are creating a new habit. We are getting rid of the mechanical habit of reacting, and we are creating a new habit of pausing the reaction, not reacting. This he calls as Nirodha. So we have 2 sanskars, Vyuthana Nirodha sanskar. The sanskar of Vyuthan, reaction, the sanskar of Nirodha, right? Pause. Vyuthana Nirodha sanskara, I'll have to see it, Abhibhava Pradurbhava. Abhibhava. Abhibhava is setting, going away, disappearing. Pradurbhava is rising, appearing. Okay, come back to. So what Patanjali is saying, the sanskar of vyuthan, the sanskar of reacting is disappearing. It is setting like the setting sun. And the sanskar of pause, the sanskar of nirodh is rising. A pradurbhava. Abhibhava, setting, pradurbhava, rising. So he's saying as we practice this pause in our life, the old habit, maybe 1,000-year-old habit of reacting to every event in life, that old habit that is now, it is going away, it is disappearing, abhibhava, and the new habit of pausing, pradurbhava. Pradur means to rise, to come forth, right? Then let us go ahead in the sutra. Nirodha kshana. Nirodha kshana. In that moment of pausing, Nirodha kshana, chitta anvaya, the mind conjuncts with this new gap of pause. Now, such beauty in his, what do you call, writings. Now, Patanjali is saying that we have an old habit of reacting, and because now we are practicing this pause in our daily life, in every event in life, that old habit is disappearing and a new habit is being created of pausing. He says, in that moment when we pause the mind, when we are standing motionless in the mind, when we are standing there in the mind without any reaction, no movement, the thoughts are passing by, in that moment, the mind suddenly conjuncts, suddenly joins with the pause. It takes the shape of the pause. So in that moment of pause, the mind takes the shape of the pause. So in that moment, the mind is empty. There is no content in the mind. So he says, Vyuthana Nirodha Sanskaryo, Abhibhava Pradurbhava, Nirodha Kshana Chitta Anvaya, the mind conjuncts, Nirodha Parinam. Nirodha Parinam means transformation. And this is the first transformation he calls as the transformation of the mind which is full of content all the time, full of thoughts and emotions and sensations all the time, not for a single moment stopping. In that moment of pause, the mind has taken the shape of the pause, and in that moment, it is free of any content for the first time. He calls this the first transformation of the mind, and he calls it the transformation of Nirodh Parinama. Now, I want to take Tawaria Sahib's translation of the same sutra because he has taken it in a very different way. So we'll just have a look at his translation. The sequence of the one which is lower is Mr. Tawaria's translation. The sequence of mental states is as follows. The mind reacts to that which is seen, then follows a moment of mind control, then ensues a moment wherein the mind of the chitta responds to both these factors. Finally, these pass away and the perceiving consciousness has full sway. Okay. Now, he has gone in sequence. The first thing is that, right, that we see that we are going into a reaction. The sequence of mental states is as follows. We see that we are going into a reaction. The mind reacts to that which is seen. So it has reacted to what has come from outside. Then the mind, there is a moment of mind control, pause. So first there is vyuthan, reaction. Then there is a moment of mind control, pause. In that moment of mind control, the stuff which the mind is made of, the plasticity of the mind, the plasticine of the mind, the mind stuff, it pauses in that moment and it tries to look at both these factors. And in that moment, as it is looking at it, is weighing both these factors. One is the reaction, and the second is the control of that reaction, which Tavaria Sahib calls as mind control. He calls that as mind control. Please remember these words because we are going to continue them in the next sutra. Right? So he says that there is a moment of mind control, which we call as pausing that reaction. In that moment, the chit has no control. It is looking, trying to balance both these. And a certain moment comes where there's nothing in the mind. Only the person who is looking at the mind, the perceiving consciousness, has full sway. And he calls this as the first transformation, where for the first time, the perceiving consciousness is reflected in an empty mind. I don't know if I've come across, but so this is the beginning of our pause. This has started from that moment where we were, what do you call, statue in the mind. We held our, what do you call, ourself in the statue in the mind, motionless in the mind. And we then come to a state where we experience, for a moment, we have a glimpse of that perceiving consciousness, the seeing consciousness, because there is no content in the mind, nothing to be seen. And so in that moment, we experience the seeing consciousness. Now, because this is a psychological exercise, I'm going to talk about a few reactions before we go to the next sutra. Okay. So just some normal reactions, how we must work upon this. Okay. Now, very simple reaction. I did it. I did it. Supposing 4 people are talking and they're talking about a youngster who has come out of college and how he's doing very well in his job. And supposing we have helped him to get that job, what is the reaction which comes immediately? I gave him that job. And that is a reaction. It is a part of our self-love. I did this, right? And can we pause that? Simple thing. Pause that, right? Now, supposing, I'm not saying that we don't say it. We may say it after 2-3 minutes that I gave him this job, but now we say it through consciousness, not in a reaction. And we will be able to see how we went from this journey of reaction to consciousness. Or we can take a typical reaction of greed. And supposing now we've been at home for nearly 2 years and we've been ordering all these things from Amazon and all that stuff. And suddenly it comes, Diwali time is coming, Amazon has a 50% sale. And immediately from within me, all the, thoughts come up, oh, I have to order this, I have to order this 50%. Now these are eyes within me, these are thoughts within me. Can I pause at that moment? Can I pause at that moment? You see, greed comes up. Right? We took revenge, so I won't go through the one on revenge again. Now, sometimes to observe self-love is a very simple thing. And it happens with everyone that I may go into a room and I'm talking, but there are 2 people sitting in a corner and they are laughing, and somehow I feel that they are laughing at me. And this is a feeling which we all go through. Now here, this is, my self-love is hurt. How can someone laugh at me, right? And can we just look at that and try to pause it over there? Now, many times we get into a mood of self-pity. Oh, how can I do this? What will happen? And some of the, you know, some of the thoughts of self-pity are very deep reactions. Uh, Supposing I've been ill for a few days, and then I'll phone my friend and I'll say, "Arey, mane tav aao to I was ill for." You didn't even bother to phone me, right? And nobody bothered to call me up and ask me how I was getting through, etc. This is self-pity, self-pity, right? So we have to, these are very dangerous eyes within us and we have to look at them. Now, I will repeat one of Tauria Sahib's statements. Never defend yourself. Let your life speak for itself. Now, whenever we want to defend ourselves, it is a reaction, right? So I'll say I never get angry, and you'll say, I saw you just day before yesterday getting angry at the traffic cop or whatever. And I'll say, oh, but that was one instant. I'll try to defend myself. And whenever I'm defending anything, only the false needs defense inside, right? Or I'll say I'm always on time, and you'll say, but yesterday only you were 10 minutes late. And I'll say, oh, the traffic was this and that and all that. I'll defend myself, right? So we have these reactions inside where we want to defend ourselves. So we can look at these reactions. There is an urge to always put ourselves right. Okay? So these are some small reactions. Now, try to, when we visit people's homes, we must look within ourselves. Supposing somebody has a better TV than the TV I have, then what thoughts are going on inside? What reactions are coming inside? And we must look inside. Don't immediately react. Where did you buy this TV? I also want to buy one like this. Then that's the end of the matter. We have reacted, and that's what do you call food for our inner growth. We have thrown it away outside. We vomited it outside. Right? So these are just a few small ones which we can look at, and because this is a psychological exercise. I remember 2 years, of course, we've not traveled, but the last trip, I got down at San Francisco airport, and the line to go through immigration was minimum 2 hours, and standing in the line. So the person who had come to pick me up, he sent me a WhatsApp message. What, you're really going to get bored in that line? So I said, no, I'm not going to get bored. It's going to be a good training for me to keep this monkey calm, right? I'm going to observe this monkey for 2 hours, and I'm not going to allow him to complain about the 2 hours or complain about the American immigration system or whatever thing it is, because these days in India, we have this thing where we just get out in 15 minutes, and there we have to stand in line for 2 hours. So every moment in life is an opportunity, right? And opportunity to work on ourselves, to pause the reaction. And as we become more adept in pausing this reaction, the reaction becomes more and more, the pause becomes more and more spontaneous. We will take the next sutra, sutra number 10. Tasya prashanta vahita sanskara. So as we practice this pause, a time will come when it starts becoming second nature to us. Then this new sanskar, this new habit of pause, it will flow. Tasya prashant. Prashant means calm. It will vahita, to flow. It will flow like a calm river. The new habit will flow like a calm river. It will be now so spontaneous, effortless effort. Right. Initially, the reaction was automatic. Now the pause has become automatic. This means now we have reached some stage in our sadhana. We have reached some state in our sadhana where now we are not just an automatum of life where we react to every moment. Every moment we are pausing the reaction, right? So he says, over a period of time, as we keep practicing this pause will become like second nature. It will become more and more spontaneous. So again, let us see, we started from that small statue in the mind, small pausing in the mind, the experience of the seer within, the perceiving consciousness. And now the new habit of pause is becoming more and more spontaneous. We don't have to remember to do it. Now it starts coming on its own. It's become a new conscious habit, which has replaced a mechanical habit. We go to the next sutra. Oh, we'll have to take Tauriya Sahib's translation of this sutra. The establishing of this habit, no, through the cultivation of this habit of chitta, there will eventually occur a steadiness of spiritual perception. Beautiful. Now, you see, you can see Mr. Tauriya has not gone through the Sanskrit translation or anything of the sutras. He's just said what happens in this sutra. He says, in this we will get spiritual perception. I remember in the last year when he was there, we used to get a lot of letters, and he would not read all the letters. I had to read all the letters. And he would tell me now in a gist. I had to tell him what was in each letter. And he would tell me what to reply, and I would reply to the letters. And letters would come of all types. And somebody would say, okay, I have lost, what do you call, I'm no longer in love with my husband. I've fallen in love with this person, right? What do I do? And I remember on one occasion, there were two very similar letters. Both talked about the same thing, that I have fallen in love with somebody else and I don't like the person I'm staying with. What should I do? This is just the gist I'm giving you. In the first instance, he's telling me that you write to that person that to give up this new person and go back to whom that person is staying with and to live with that person properly. And the second instance, he's saying, it would be better to leave that person and find a new life with this new person you have fallen in love with. So I asked him that, sir, what is this? How can you reply to two different people with the same question? How can you give them different replies? And he says, in the first instance where I've told that person to go back to the person that person is living with, that is something which, a karma which is not yet finished. It has to be fulfilled, that karma. And in the second instance where I said you leave this person and go with your new lover or whatever, that new lover is not a new lover. He has come from the past life. You see? So now, and I mean, this is just some instances which are, but this is spiritual perception. Just the other day we were talking that, some people come to the Guru and then they stay for some time and then they go to another Guru. And we wonder what did they not find here that they went to another Guru. Right? So, but then when you see that person in time, when we see that person in time, we see that that person cannot burn the inner impurities because the inner impurities are still wet. In Gujarati, we say કે એના લાકડા હજી ભીના છે. એ બળશે નહીં. The wood is still wet. The wood is not going to burn. You see, so they have to go from guru to guru till the what do you call the wood dries down. Then somebody can light a match and burn the wood. Can you see? But to see this, we need spiritual perception. Otherwise, we'll just say, "Oh, this person came here, did not like it, and go." But he had to go. There was no other way out. He had to go somewhere else. Right? So, Tawariya Sahib is saying in this Tasya Prashant Mahita Sanskarat, his what do you call translation is a very different translation. He's saying the cultivation of this habit leads to a steadiness of spiritual perception. And two things will fall down from our lives once spiritual perception starts flowing in our lives. The first thing which we will drop completely is we will stop complaining about anything. A disciple never complains. And the second thing is we will never find fault with anyone else. It is never anyone else's, it is never ever anyone else's fault. It is always our fault. So once the inner spiritual perception opens up, we know that whatever event has come in our life, it can only come through our invitation. No one else is ever at fault. No one else is, what do you call, nothing has to be complained about. Right? And these two things will drop from our life completely. So he's saying the cultivation of this habit will lead to a steadiness of spiritual perception. I'll give you one more example of Mr. Tawariya. He had a huge plot of land in Thana. And every few weeks, it was in litigation, that land. Every few weeks, he would go to the Thana court, drive down to the Thana court, sit for hours. What they call in Hindi over here is Tariq Padta hai. So there would be a date fixed and he would come back. One day somebody arranged, I won't give a name, a very person who is even famous today, a political, this thing is still a minister in Maharashtra, for him to come and meet Mr. Tawariya Sahib. And I came and they were sitting over there and he's saying, I will finish all the problems of your land. He's telling Tawariya Sahib. So after a lot of this, that Tawariya Sahib said that, "Nay, you please forgive me, but I don't want to do it in this way. Let it happen in its own way." Of course, that person went away. I asked him, "Sir, what is this? The problem is there. Get rid of the problem. Somebody is getting rid of the problem for you. Why are you this thing? You want to go to Thana every few weeks. You sit there for hours. And then, you know, what they call that date is given, Tariq Padta hai, and you come back." But he says the land is not going to be sold in my lifetime. My lifetime, I have to go to the court and sit over there and come back. So this is spiritual perception. This is spiritual perception. Right? So, one more example I'll give. I don't know, I have a whole, I don't know, so many examples. I can just go on the whole day. But I'll just give one more example. He was treating one boy and the boy was responding very slowly to the treatment. The father of the boy was very rich, and he called a surgeon from, I don't remember exactly whether it was from England or somewhere, to perform an operation on the boy. And so Mr. Tavarias, I tried to tell the father, don't do it, let me give him medicine. This boy who has come, he's willingly taken this disease as a punishment upon himself. Don't bring anyone to have an operation. The father listened. The father did not listen to him. And he called this surgeon from abroad, very famous surgeon, and the surgery was going to happen in Jaslok Hospital. Those days, the stock exchange got over at 12 o'clock, so around 12:30, I came to his home. And he was sitting there like this. I said, so what is happening? And he said that boy's operation is going on, and within a few minutes, he's going to die. And he's gone. This is spiritual perception. But of course, he's at the peak of spiritual perception. In our case, if we can at least see that whatever pain and suffering I have in my life, it is only by my own invitation that it has come. Nobody else is responsible for it. And if I want to change that pain or suffering, then I have to change inside of me what is inviting that pain or suffering. If we can understand this much, then our spiritual perception starts growing. Otherwise, we are always looking for faults outside. Something like this happened, right? And once we understand that by transforming something inside, the outside situation changes, then we really, this is the beginning of real inner spiritual perception. We'll take the next sutra. Sarvarthata ekagrata shaya udaya chittasya samadhi parinama. Sarvarthatha. That is, what do we call fragmentation, everywhereness. Ekagrata, one-pointedness. Kshay uday. Now, as we keep on living the pause in our daily life, a point will come where our attention, which is everywhere, will come to a state of one-pointed. Again, he's using very similar language. Sarvarthata, fragmentation, everywhereness. Uska shay, it is now diminishing. Ekagrata, one-pointedness, uday. Sarvarthata, ekagrata, kshaya, uday. Sarvarthata, kshay, ekagrata, uday. When this happens, when this one-pointedness happens, chittasya samadhi parinama. Okay. Now, the establishing of this habit and the restraining of the mind, calming of the thinking instrument from its thought form making tendency, eventually resulting in the constant power to contemplate. Let us go into this. Now, in the first Nirodha Parinama, where we started with statue, and there was a transformation of the mind. Now, the seeing consciousness is looking at the mind with something which we call attention. So now he's not talking just of the mind. He's talking of the medium which allows us to see. Right? It is attention which flows out of my eyes, which allows the eyes to see. The eyes are just doors. The five senses are just doors. I throw attention out, then I look at you. I may be looking at you, but I'm not looking at you because no attention is going out of the eyes. So I'm just gazing at you without looking at you. So it is the inner seer which is using attention to look at the mind. So he's saying, what is the quality of our attention? Patanjali is saying. So he's saying the quality of our attention is sarvarthatha. It goes everywhere. It can't stick for a moment in one place. Our attention is dancing in so many places. Right? If I go shopping with my daughter, he said, Papa, I want to buy this. And after 5 minutes, I want to buy this. Then I want to buy this. You see, the attention dances all over the place. Right? And this is the, what do you call, our inner state. We want to, what do you call? She's gone shopping, and I wear t-shirts. I don't wear a shirt. And she's just sent me a message that I bought a shirt for you and you'll have to wear it. So, the attention goes everywhere. Now, so this is the quality of our attention. Our attention it's fragmented in so many places. It is fragmented in my bank balance. It is fragmented in my house. It is fragmented in my car, in my possessions. It is fragmented in my relationships. If my friend goes to your house for dinner and does not come and you don't invite me, then my attention is stuck over there and I feel what do you call pain in the heart over here. So attention is fragmented all over the place. Attention is fragmented in my thoughts. It is fragmented in the thought that I am an Indian. It is fragmented in the thought that I am of this caste. It is fragmented in the thought that we are of this race, etc., etc. Right? So our attention is all over the place. Sarvarthatha, he calls it. So the perceiving consciousness is looking at the mind. He's saying now, because the perceiving consciousness is looking at the mind, as we continue this habit of pause, the very perceiving consciousness, the medium which it uses to perceive, the quality of attention from everywhere becomes one-pointed. Sarvarthata kshay ekagrata udaya. Chittasya samadhi parinam. Everything has an outer covering. Everything has an inner essence. In the Mahabharata, there's a beautiful story that before the drama of the Mahabharata was going to happen, all the gods and the demons, they had to decide who is going to play which role. Right? And everybody had to play some part or the other. And in the Mahabharata, there's a huge chapter called Ansh Avtaran. Avtaran means to come down, right? So, which god came down into which form and played that role? So the other gods went to Chandra, the moon god, and say, you also have to do something. This is a huge drama and everybody is taking part in this drama. And Chandra said that I will give my son, but I love my son so much, I can't stay away from my son. Right? Can you see that my son returns to me when he's 16 years old? Right? I can't stay more than that away from my son. So Chandra's son, and he takes the role of Abhimanyu. In the Mahabharata. Now here Abhimanyu is killed on the battlefield. All the Pandavas are crying and all that Abhimanyu, Arjun's son, has been killed on the battlefield. There Barcha, that is Chandra's son, has returned to Chandra, and Chandra is so happy that his son has returned to him after 16 years. And in the Mahabharata, we have both these together. Here, one side, everybody is crying that Abhimanyu has died on the battlefield. And on the other side, his father is so happy that the boy has returned to him after 16 years. Now, right, Ekagrata Parinam. Now, in the previous sutra, Tawaria Sahib talked about the opening up of spiritual perception. Now he's talking about the transformation of the mind due to that spiritual perception. And this happens because the attention, which was what do you call fragmented, the attention has now become one pointed, and in that one pointed there is samadhi parinam. The mind transforms, that now the mind does not see the outer cover, it sees the inner essence. It doesn't see the outer form, it sees the inner essence. I was a number of years in the stock market. Even now, whenever I get time, I like to trade. I love to trade in the market. So, and this knowledge which you have of the market, you want to pass it on to someone. And so my son recently started trading in the stock market. So I said, why don't you come and learn from me? He says, no, I don't want to learn from you. I want to do it on my own. So, what do you call? I said, okay. Now, if I was just looking at the form, he is my son and he must learn from me, right? But you have to look further on. He's something more than a son. He's some other, what do you call, soul which has come to you as a son, but that soul has its own journey, right? So when the attention from what do you call fragmentation becomes one pointed, the mind which that attention is looking at, that mind now begins. The first transformation was the transformation of pause, nirodha parinam. Now it becomes samadhi parinam. Now the mind is not looking at the outer form, it is looking at the inner essence. It grasps the inner essence, and this is the samadhi parinam. So he's saying sarvarthata shay ekagrata uday chittasya samadhi parinam. Beautiful language of Patanjali, beautiful language. Right? We'll just take Tavaria Sahib's translation. The establishing of this habit and the restraining of the mind, calming of the thinking instrument from its thought form making tendency, eventually resulting in the constant power to contemplate. Right? Okay. Now we have to distinguish over here between what is a thought form and what is a thought. Now, an impression comes from the five senses. It meets memory inside. I know I've not talked about this, so we are going to talk about it one day. It meets memory inside, and a thought form is created. Tavaria Sahib says that every second we create 120 of these thought forms. The thought is not created. These thought forms travel from here, this here, over the top of the head, and they come here. This is the screen of our computer, the forebrain. It is the screen of our computer. And there the thought form is translated into language. When we are talking about thought, we are talking about language. We are not talking about form. I hope I'm coming across. Out of those 120 forms which come over here, because the brain works at a speed of 1/16th of a second, at a speed of 1/16th of a second, that is, it can create 16 thoughts in a second. We create 16 thoughts over here. Those thoughts are in language. This inner chattering which goes on at 16 thoughts per second, it is in a language. We are talking in a language inside. But before that thought became language, it was a thought form. Now, your language may be different, my language may be different, an Adivasi's language may be different, some other country, the person's language may be different. But the thought form created before it goes into language could be very similar. Am I coming across in this? Right? So He's saying now we have reached the state. We are not pausing the language. In the first sutra, the language was over when the perceiving conscious. Now we are not allowing the thinking instrument inside to make even the thought form. Can you get it? Not even to make the thought. So can you go back to that translation, please? Thank you. So he's saying the establishing of this habit and restraining of the mind from its thought form making tendency. We are slowing down, we are restraining it, we are slowing down this thought form making tendency. From 120, it will slow down to 60. From 60, it will slow down to 30. Eventually resulting into the constant power to contemplate. We can contemplate, we can look beyond the forms, whether it is the gross form, the subtle form, deep into the essence of something directly. And this power comes to the mind, and this is called as Samadhi Parinam. We'll go to the next sutra. Tata Puna, what's the time? 5:45. Tata Puna, Shanta Uddita, Tulya Pratyaya, Chittasya Ekagrata Parinam. Okay. When mind control and the controlling factor are equally balanced, then comes the condition of one pointedness. I'm directly taking Tauriya Sahib's what you call translation. Okay, we'll now go to this. Now, we started this journey with pause, statue in the mind. Then we had an experience of the perceiver, the perceiving consciousness. Then the mind went through first the Nirodha transformation. Second transformation, it went into Samadhi transformation. Now he's talking about the final transformation, which is Ekagrata Parinam, the one condition of one-pointedness. What does this mean? Tata Puna Shanta Udita Tulya Pratyaya. Now he's saying Tata Puna, now go back. Now repetition, Tata Puna. Shanta Udita. One impression is what you call disappearing, setting, and one impression is rising, but there is Tulya Pratyaya. Tulya Pratyaya. There is balance. Balance. The pratiti is of balance which is coming now. This is beautiful. Now, this can be done in many ways, but we'll take one way today. And when we reach the third chapter, we will open this out in different ways. Now, let us just talk about something else. That supposing we start our journey of self-observation. So how do we start our journey of self-observation? We divide ourselves into two parts. I say Rajan and I am looking, right? Initially, it is very difficult because I don't, at a level of sensitivity, I don't feel this separation. Over a period of practice, I feel this separation. So I say, Rajan's son passed in the exam. Rajan is happy. I am looking. Right? Or I'll say Rajan's son did not do his homework. Rajan is unhappy. I am looking. Now, as we progressed in this, we saw that there were two parts to this. One was the perceiving consciousness, the seer inside, and one was the mind. And within the mind, he has now created two parts, the mind control part and the controlling factor part, which we'll go into later on. So I'll say that events are changing in life. Today, Rajan wanted to see a movie, and then it rained very heavily, so the show was cancelled. And Rajan is so upset that the movie was cancelled. But I am looking, nothing has happened to me. Whatever has happened to Rajan. So I come to a state where the events of life move. Some events bring happiness. Some events bring pain. Some events bring understanding. Some events lead to different types of reactions. But I say in all this, life is ever changing. In this ever changing life, the pratyay of the inner seer, the sensitivity of the inner seer is always the same, tulya pratyay. So he says, this event came in, this rising event brought happiness. This disappearing event is what you call bringing sadness. Shanta udita tulya pratyay. But in both, I am taking an impression of the inner seer, and that impression of the inner seer is balanced, tulya, in both these, whether it is happiness or whether it is sadness. That inner impression of the seer inside does not change. The events of life keep on changing. Somebody, a baby is born, somebody is going to die, somebody has a marriage, somebody has a divorce. Life, the events keep on changing, this ever-changing life, but the seer inside always gives me the same impression. So you say, Tata Puna Shanta Udita Tulya Pratyaya Ekagrata Parinam. This is the final transformation of the mind, where in every event of life, the what do you call, the mind is reflecting the seer inside, and that seer inside is always the same. He is always steady. Nothing changes over there. The intensity keeps changing as we go deeper, deeper. The events of life change. So he's saying, in all these changing events in life, for me, the inner impression of that seer is always the same. He calls this as the condition of one-pointedness. Now, we will have to go to Mr. Tawaria's translation of this, because he has taken this in a very different way, very different way. When mind control and the controlling factor are equally balanced, then comes the condition of one-pointedness. Okay, now, here when we talked about this sutra, we talked about the impression of the inner seer. Mr. Tavaria is not talking about the impression of the inner seer. He is saying that two parts of the mind should balance. He's saying that it's very easy to talk about the inner seer, but he's saying this is every moment in life, and all these four sutras must go together in a sequence. So let us see what he's talking about. So now, supposing you insult me, we'll go back to Sutra 1, that where we are standing motionless in the mind. Go back to that example. You insult me, and then there is mind control. I try to pause that reaction. So that pausing of reaction he calls as mind control. But it doesn't end there. The controlling factor, your insult, the controlling factor is trying to pull me back into identification. Give it to him this time. Next time we'll control the mind. Right? This time let me give it to him. So there is initially there is this inner struggle. It's not going to just happen that everything passes away and the perceiving consciousness has full sway. Mr. Tavaria is saying you're going to go through so many steps. So there's this tug of war between mind control and the controlling factor. Something wants to pull you back into identification, pull us back into identification. Something which understands wants to pull us out of identification. And there's this inner struggle. And every time the mind control may not win, the controlling factor may win. Now he says, when these two things are happening inside, when this inner struggle we call as tapa, right? When this inner struggle is going on, there is a knack in this inner struggle. There is a way to do this inner struggle. I'll go back to one example. You know, all these Taoist masters, and they all nearly have the same name. But one of them, his name was Leataju. Leataju. And Leataju, one day he went fishing. And he put a worm on his fishing hook and threw the hook into the water. And the fish came and caught the worm. And he was so happy, he pulled it immediately. The fish took the worm and went away. So Leataju is saying too fast. Next time he put in the worm on the hook and threw the hook into the water. And the fish came and he says, last time too fast. So he waited. The fish ate the worm and went away. Saying too slow. Third time he put the worm on the hook and threw the hook into the water. The fish came and the fish pulled a little, and Leataju just pulled in the same amount that the fish pulled. Then the fish again pulled, and he pulled in exactly the same amount that the fish pulled. And at a certain moment, when mind control and controlling factor are equally balanced, can you understand? At that moment, the fish got caught, and he comes back to his place, and all his students, all his disciples gather. He says, today I've learned a big lesson. You only pull that much as life pulls. Don't pull more, nothing over. And this is the trick which Mr. Tavaria is saying over here. Tavaria side is saying over here that this is a continuous process. You can't take these 4 sutras separately. There is a struggle, and in that struggle you learn not to, what do you call, mind control too much, that you suppress the anger inside. You have to balance the mind control with the controlling factor. The insult is pulling you, you want to pause the reaction, and both of them have to reach a certain inner balance. And when you reach that state of inner balance, that is what he calls as ekagrata parinam. So this is 2 ways of looking at the same sutra, right? So we started our journey right from where we were statue in the mind. From statue in the mind, we came to Nirodha Parinam, and that became our second nature. We had an experience of the perceiver inside. Then we went into Samadhi Parinam, where now spiritual perception started opening up and we could see deeper inside. And then we came to a state where the condition of one-pointedness. Life is a tightrope walk. Every moment it is a condition of balance. Mind control, controlling factor. You cannot say truth is something static. Now, if I'm too much to the left, the pendulum, then I bring the pendulum in between. The tightrope walker has a kind of stick where he comes in between. Sometimes where he has come in between, last time that may have been too much to the right. The truth has changed, which was not truth too much to the right is now in the middle over here. So each moment life, this mind control and controlling factor are moving, and through that we are finding our way through life on the path, rising on the path of consciousness from this end of the rope to that end of the rope. We balance and find our way. So Mr. Tavaria is saying that this is the practical aspect of this sutra. Of course, I gave you the philosophical aspect where we experience the seer inside each moment. Anyway, I'll stop here. If there are any questions, I'll take those questions. Next time, we will continue from where we left off in the Yoga Sutra. Any questions?
Any questions? Can you please raise your hand, or you can just unmute yourself.
Sir, I have written it in the chat box. The one-pointedness that you talk, can you explain it with an example? How can we exercise this balance? One live example.
How we can, what do you call, experience this,
yes.
what do you call, balance? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'll just come to that. Now, supposing, what do you call, say I have a friend of many years, and then that friend does something which hurts me terribly. Right? This could be a common example. And that thought keeps on coming in me. And when that thought comes, I'm totally identified with the thought. I feel I'm very angry with him. I want to do this with him, etc., etc. And then I say, okay, and now this is mine. This is the controlling factor. It's pulling me away. So I now try to stop that. Right? Now, if I stop too hard, I don't want it, right? Then I'm going to suppress that anger. Right? So it is like I pay attention to it, but I pay attention to it as if I'm looking from behind a pillar, not directly. Can you get it? So then it is a kind of passive attention, which I'm just holding. I don't allow myself to be carried away with it, but I don't, what do you call, suppress it inside. And as I practice this for some time, a point will come where the anger will go away. The anger will go away. And I'll experience a moment where things are balanced inside. And this I can practice with so many things, right? Supposing I have a favorite cup, and then one day I go into the kitchen, the cup is broken. Who has broken this cup? And suddenly the thoughts, like, it's a small thing, but I can easily work in the same way with this small thing. And a point will come where my inner attention is not being attached to this point. My inner attention is not being attached to controlling it. My inner attention is free of all of it. It is the condition of one-pointedness.
Thank you, sir.
Sir,
Yeah.
when you were explaining, does this state happen when I become the observer of my thoughts that yes, I am getting angry, or this is because I am getting, I am identifying myself with the as a person, like as my name as Ninu, but I am just to I'm identifying the friendship, like my friend as a part of me that we have been so long, and we had such a close relationship, and now my friend has done this to me, behind my back, and I'm very upset with it. So is it if I can somehow see the friend as another soul, and maybe I can talk to myself saying that like it was my past karmas, and this is, will this help?
Everything is mixed in what you're saying.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
Right? Because
Okay.
We don't bring in past karmas, otherwise we buffer the shock.
Okay.
And we don't want to create a buffer. We want to face the reality. It has happened. Right? We don't have the perception to see it was past karma. We are creating an imagination that it was past karma.
Right.
So don't go into that unless you can see. Right? And if you can see, there is no reaction. That's the end of the matter.
Right.
Right. But you are, what do you call, creating the past karma to suppress the reaction.
The plant is okay.
So the shock of what has happened doesn't hurt you so much. Right? And the whole thing is to allow the shock to hurt as much as possible. Because that inner soul of ours is sleeping in the bar. And only a shock will awaken that inner soul. Right? So that is the first thing. Now the thing is that don't start from observing. Start from saying no. When you feel anger coming inside, say no to the anger. Just say no. Don't try to observe the anger initially. Right? A state will come where you're separate, that this is Rajan and I am watching, Rajan is angry, but that is a long way away still. That separation is not here now. So the initial practice of non-identifying is not observation. The initial practice of non-identifying is to say no. Right? Just say, imagine that anger is a group of friends who have very bad habits, right? And they come and say, come on, let's go out together. And you'll definitely say, no, I won't come out with you, right? Now, anger is away, coming inside, and you just say, I will not go for a walk with you. Right? So this is the first practice which starts.
Okay.
Right? Or I may come to your home, I see your TV, and I see I'm feeling jealous. So I pause it. I say, okay, just stop over there. I'm not going to go for a walk with you. You're not a good friend. You understand? Huh?
Fine. Yes.
As we practice this, a state will come where suddenly I'll say that, okay, Rajan is now feeling jealous and I am watching. Initially, it will come as glimpses. And there will be at a sensual level, at the level of sensitivity, there will be a feeling of separation, that I am looking at this chair. The chair is separate from me. I am looking at Rajan. Rajan is separate from me. Can you get what I'm trying to say? As if I'm looking at a piece of furniture. Right? And there will be a state of non-identification. Rajan is upset over his son. Can you understand? Right? I am looking. Then Rajan is not me. Supposing you are upset over your son and you tell me that you are upset over your son, right? I'm going to look at this from a distance.
Right.
I'm not going to get identified or what is going to happen. If it is my son, I'll say, oh, what is going to happen? Can you get what I'm trying to say?
Got it.
Now I'm looking at Rajan as if it is your son only. That separation has happened. Can you get it? But that takes a long time to come. When I see myself as the other also, as I see the other. At present, I will start with just saying no.
No.
Just saying no. I'm not taking a walk with you. And over a period of 3 months, as I practice this, slowly I'll start separating. There'll be glimpses of separation.
Right now, it's just no.
Just
For
say no.
after
Just-
3 months, we can discuss this
You'll
further.
have to, but you'll have to say no couple of times, because there's the mind control is no, and there's the
Right.
controlling factor which will pull you again. So again you will
Right.
say no. Again it will pull you. Again you will say no. And this inner struggle creates heat. That heat is tapa. Right? That is the heat of tapa, which we have to go
Right.
through.
Rajan bhai, if you
Thank you,
permit
sir.
me, I will share something very
Please do,
practical
please do,
with
sir.
Nenu.
Please do.
See,
Please.
Nenu, even sometimes saying no becomes difficult when the impulse is arising. So what we can really cultivate is just not to act on the impulse that is arising, making it a habit of not acting on the impulse that is arising. And you know that there are many things which just come out of sheer habit. We develop so many ideas or habits which are just because of the fact that we have been indulging in the same thing over and over again. And the moment this thought comes up that I have to act like this, we just take a pause. And one person had, in one book I had read this very beautiful technique. I read about it, that the master said that whenever an impulse arises, we just try and figure out where it is coming from. So like I was and I'll give you the practical example. I was used to having almost 8 to 10 cups of tea every day. And I read about this particular technique and I decided, okay, when this thought of having tea arises in my mind, I will just take a pause and see where it is coming from. And within one day, so many things just disappeared. And I was no longer bound by my desire to have tea. It was something that I could choose, that if now I really want to have tea, it is needed by my system. So I must have it. Otherwise, the compulsion to have tea was gone. It is very simple. Just a question of becoming a little more aware. And
Like I have this compulsion of eating sweet. I am very, very fond of sweet. And I have been promising myself so many times and I've been breaking this promise. Maybe I'll just work on this, where the impulsive sensation and where it's coming from. Thank you.
Our real work is not on the instinctive center. The instinctive center wants to have a sweet, right? Try to sense the compulsion inside. The compulsion is coming from some inner knot inside. Sweet is just an excuse.
So what can it be?
Just sense it, feel it, and go with it. You may not be able to observe it initially, but after a point, you'll be able to observe it. Then it will tell you where it is coming from. But don't work too much with instinctive sensations.
Okay.
We are more concerned with negative emotions and reactions.
Right. Got it. Thank you.
That is the area where a lot of work needs to gets done on the subconscious mind. A lot of things are there. So it's that
All negative emotions are identification.
identification. Vatsala, please go ahead. So we took
And
your
remember
time.
this saying, I have a right not to be angry. Right? So, yeah, please go ahead. I can't hear her.
Vatsala ji, go ahead.
No, I can't
You
hear
have to unmute yourself, Vatsala.
Namaste, sir. Vatsala from Bangalore.
her. Namaste, namaste.
Yes, sir. This is not a question. You are an awesome teacher. This morning I was at the bank. I was so excited about today's session. There was an incident where I had every reason to get normally in my temperament I would have got annoyed, but I stopped myself in my tracks because I remembered today is the session on pause. And I really thought of you in the bank. So your examples are wonderful. My request is please be generous with your examples because they make the learning so profound and so immediate.
Thank you, thank you.
Your examples are really wonderful. Don't stint on the examples, please, as many as you can, because our
Thank you.
learning takes place very well.
Right. I'll do that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I'm so grateful to you. I really thought of you today, and I prevented one ugly scene in the bank. I said, "Oh, see, Rajan Vakil is going to take this class for us."
Thank you.
Any more sharing or questions? Anything?
So we don't have any more
don't.
questions.
Can I ask something?
Yes, please
Yes.
go ahead. Who is this?
Nazia.
Nazia, come in, Nazia.
Nazia, please.
Sir, actually, when you said about this, that the wood is still wet, so one has to go from one guru to another. Can you please explain more on this? Because that really brought me my attention, and I think I have experienced something like this too.
See, one thing is when we are curious at an intellectual level. And one thing is when the inner quest starts. So the quest is an inner journey which we undertake. But till the quest starts, we may have so many unanswered questions in our mind, and we may feel we get the answer here, get the answer here. And no one is ever going to get the answer because we have to take attention inside, right? So, but for attention to go inside, it needs a certain inner stability, a certain inner understanding, right? And till that understanding comes, then we are still in that state of curiosity, which I call as the wood is still wet, right? So we go from one teacher to the other. Many people come, and you see there's a horizontal journey and there's a vertical journey we talked about. So people come, you can't criticize people, but they say, okay, I have done meditation, I have done Reiki, I have done this, I have done that, I have done that. And I can see that they have just, gone on the horizontal plane. They have not taken one step up. And one of my gurus was Swami Ram Dulare Bapu. I spent 7 years with him. And he used to say, "Main chala to khub pahuncha kahin bhi nahi, yaani chale hi nahi." He used to say, he was such a beautiful person, such a beautiful person. And he left in 1982. But what a person he was. And today, whatever I am is because of him. He trained us through all the small things in life. And so he had these very, very small sayings, about things. And he would just, these one-liners he would say and go, देखो रे देखो उसे तो देखो जो दिख रहा है उसे नहीं जो देख रहा है उसे, those kind of sayings he had. So what I'm trying to say, a point comes where you then start the inner quest, and when you start the inner quest, then you realize that the outer guru is only to point the finger in the right direction. And sometimes when you have an obstacle in your inner quest, you don't understand the scenery, you feel a little lost of where you are, then he may give you one line, or he's not going to, solve the problem for you. Definitely not going to solve. He may create more problems for you, right? But he's going to do it in such a way that we gather the strength to overcome those obstacles by ourselves, right? So
Yes, as long as the knowledge does not bring some internal change, more emotional stability, for example, maybe that's what I need in that time.
yes, there is a movement from sentimentality to emotional stability. At present, we are very sentimental people.
Mm.
And sentimentality is not emotion.
Mm. You have to explain this difference.
I'll take it sometime.
Okay, sir.
Mr. Tavaria was very fond of Mabel Collins. I don't know if you've heard of her.
Yes, Light on the Path.
Light on the Path. She's written this beautiful book, Light on the Path. And it starts in this way. Before the eyes can see, they must be incapable of tears.
I remember your example.
Right. So if you come to me with something and I start crying with you, then I can't see the cause of your problem. You see, because I'm identified because of the tears.
So that is sentimental.
That is sentimentality. Mm. And love is not sentimentality. Love is understanding the other.
Yes. I think I got the direction. Thank you.
And Rajan bhai, you said you spoke about how Solibhai gave two different prescriptions to the two women, who wanted, were in a dilemma about who to go with. So I was reminded of an incident from Edgar Cayce. Edgar Cayce was a visionary who would see people's past lives, and there was a woman who came to him, and she was having two suitors, and she was undecided as to whom she should choose, whom she should marry. So Edgar Cayce went into trance, and when he came out, he told, during the trance, he spoke to her, he told that, you see, you are having connections with both of them through your past lives. And each one has come here or will be here in your life, in your evolutionary journey, to teach you some very valuable lessons. So it is immaterial whom you choose now. You will choose the other one also at some later point of time, and you will learn from him also. So this is about the flow of life. We all come here to learn our lessons and grow. And people come, they are just messengers of God, and they come here and teach us some lessons. But great are those people who can see what lesson one has to teach and how one has to deal with. That's amazing. And the talk that you gave today was a complete blueprint of sadhana. It was a wonderful blueprint. So thank you so much, Rajan bhai.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And
sir.
we'll just close it with some mantras. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Naktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So thank you, everyone. And we will
Thank
be
you.
meeting
Thank
next
you.
year.
With God's grace next week.